that it then, yeah? All in, Joe. Hi and welcome back to the channel. Now today's live match is a Wolves AA midweek open on the Shropshire Union Canal at Brewood. There's about a dozen of us here and it's a lovely day. I'm looking forward to catching a few fish. I've got the legend Joe Brennan on the end peg to my right, which is peg 1. But it's not actually peg 1 because I missed out the first 3 pegs. So I think he's on peg 4 and I'm on peg 5. And I've got Ed Warren the other side of me. Now I feel the pegs further to my left are better pegs, but we should still catch some fish here nonetheless. So I'm really looking forward to it. I've decided to feed a bread line on the inside because I've said this before, the canals just lately, since lockdown, are not holding the colour that they used to hold. I don't know why that is, but when we came down this morning, this canal was pretty clear, to be fair. So I put some bread in just to get a start on it and let my other line settle. So like I said, I've put bread in. I've put bread in at top 2+2. Well, just past top 2+2. I'm going to feed casters over the top of that. Now the other lines, the line I'm feeding to my left off the front of that boat, well, it's about 1.5 meters shorter than the boat. A sweet skimmer with a bit of black and some black river. The black river is just to give it a bit of a bind. And in that I've put worms and casters, chopped worm and caster. To the right of my peg, on the back end of jackdaw, I've fed ground bait, same mix but with squats and hemp added. And I've also fed a couple of lines which I'm going to dedicate to hemp. One on the boat to my left, tight to the boat, which is quite shallow. Now I'm guessing that's because of the silt. Them boats don't move a lot. And with the boats going through, it kicks rubbish up the shelves and it all tends to settle at the end of these boats, the bottom of these boats. Now jackdaw at the back of that's obviously used more because there's a hole around about where the propeller would be. So that obviously gets turned on and idles for a while just to recharge batteries, I'm guessing. So I'm going to feed some hemp there. Now I'm feeding the hempies. I'm potting a bit in on each line. I'm putting a bit more on the back end of the boat to my left. Front of the boat, I should say. And I'm going to sprinkle that from a bit of a height. There's probably 1/3 of a pot in there. And I'm just sprinkling, tapping it out the pole so as it goes down in a little bit of a spread. And then to the back end of jackdaw, yeah, I'm probably putting less than half the amount there, and I intend to loose feed over the top of both of them. Looking back on the match, I should have probably just loose fed casters to the front of that boat to my left. Maybe that would have got me a few more fish, but you know what hindsight's like, it's a wonderful thing. But anyway, so I've fed all my lines, and the first thing I'm going to do is run a 6mm punch over that bread. There are skimmers in this canal. Like I say, I think it's better further up to my left, but there's still some stragglers down this end, so hopefully we can catch a few of them. And first drop in, I'll catch me a little skimmer, which is a great start. I don't know, about 4 ounce maybe. Maybe a little bit bigger, I don't know. Hard to guess the weight of these little skimmers. But well worth catching. Like I say, I'm using a 6mm punch on there. I haven't done anything with the bread. I've just fed liquidised bread. Nothing special about it. It's just a cheap bread I've bought from the co-op in the village. Put it in the liquidiser. And then once I've liquidised it, I put it through a pinky riddle. And anything that doesn't go through the pinky riddle goes back in the liquidiser and gets liquidised again. And then what doesn't go through the riddle that time ends up in the bin. I don't take any crusts off or anything like that. It just all goes in the liquidiser. And like I say, whatever goes through the pinky riddle goes in the bag. And then once that bag's done, it goes in the freezer until I get to use it. And then when I get on the bank, comes out the bag onto the pinky riddle again. All gets sieved through the pinky riddle and it's ready to go. And that's it. That's all I do with my liquidised bread. If I'm on a fast flowing water, I will add a bit of gravel to it. I've got some white gravel that I bought from an aquatic centre years ago. To be fair, I've probably only used it 2 or 3 times in the whole time I've had it. It'll probably see me out. It'll last me my whole lifetime, I should imagine. The only times I have used it was when I went down on the Old Neen at March. And I didn't tend to fish bread down there much anyway. But anyway, second chuck in, another skimmer. Happy days. It's all going well. I've noticed Joe on the MPEG has started doing the same as me. He started on bread and he's catching skimmers as well. Ed to my left's gone in on ground bait. And I don't think he's catching so well just yet. But it's early days. But after them 2 skimmers, it went down. The next fish I had was a little gudgeon. And then followed by a couple of roach. Not a bad start though, decent start. And all the time this is leaving the other line settle and hopefully draw some fish in. So this line was finished once this boat had got over it. I couldn't get another bite over the top of it once this boat went through. Which tends to happen a lot when you're fishing short. It lasts for a little while, but once boats start moving over it, that tends to be the end of it. So now he's gone over, I'm just going to top up that line, put a bit more bread in there, hope that that brings the peg back to life. But like I say, normally it's gone once that happens. There is the odd occasion where you'll carry on catching, but it's not very often. But once that line has died, I'll carry on throwing casters over the top of it, and then hopefully later on, once we get a lull in traffic, if we get a lull in traffic, I'll be able to drop on it and hopefully catch a roach or a perch or 2. But for now, I'll just give her another feed of bread and then hopefully catch a few more fish on it. Time to leave that alone for a bit and go and have a look on my other lines, see if there's anything settled on my far lines. I've put my maggot rig on to start with, and I'm going over the worm line. Which is the same distance across as my squat line. I've got 2 distances on my squat line, so I've plumbed at 11.5 metres, which is just going up the shelf on the far bank to my right, and then I'll push out to 13 metres. I fed ground bait on both of the lines, 11.5 and 13 metres, and I'll loose feed over the top of both. So the spray off my squats will feed both lines. And I'll keep dropping up and down the shelf as the day goes on, hopefully to keep in contact with the fish. But for now, I'm running a maggot over the worm line, see if I can pick up any bonus skimmers or perch or whatever. Quick look on the maggot over the top of the worm line catches me a little tiny perch. So I'm now going to try the worm over the top and see if that improves the stamp. Yeah, that's an half decent fish. Float choice for this rig is a 4x14 into carbon. I've got an hour 16 hook length and a size 16 natural N30 hook. My opinion is I really don't think line diameters matter when you're fishing worms, and if I hook anything decent I want half a chance of getting it out. That was me trying to persuade one of the boaters to come over a bit. He's come through the bridge and he's tight to the far bank. Managed to persuade him to come over a bit. So he's coming down the middle of the canal now, or just past middle, which shouldn't cause too much hassle. I was just about to feed that line again, and I've noticed another boat coming through, so I'm going to wait for that boat to go through before I put any ground bait in. I've still not fed that ground bait because there's another boat coming through. So I'll have a quick look on the pinky while I wait for that to go through, and then I'll feed. Struggling to get in the water at the minute. I'm going to try me up the shelf line, get out the way of the boat traffic. And there's me dropping it over to my 13 metre line, again on the pinky, to see what's about up the shelf. It's around 18 inches deep there, which is adequate. I'm straight into fish. So there's fish in the peg, there's a few fish there to catch if I want to get my head down. But while it's early on, I still want to try and catch some bonus fish. That ain't a bad stamp. I mind catching one of them every throw. But they're not all that big. And as you can see, it's quite busy this morning with the boats. So I've got a feeling I'm going to be doing a lot of topping up throughout the day. As you can see there, I've got two 5 litre tubs plus my bucket with my base mixing. Now in the one 5 litre tub I've got my grain bait that I'm putting worms and casters in, and the other one is where I've got my squats in, and I've got my base mix so I can top up into each tub and then feed from there. Just missed out on a crossover there. I feel it's important to keep topping up as well, especially when you've got lots of boats on. You've got to keep that grain bait going in. It just gives a fish something to home in on. If you don't keep topping up, I'm convinced that a lot of that gets washed away and you're left with nothing in the peg. Especially when you get crossovers or boats going right over the top of where you're fishing. Especially in shallower water, I'm just convinced there's nothing left in your peg, which is the reason why I top up so often. I see all too many times when I'm walking down the bank before a match and I see how much ground bait people have got mixed up on the bank, and it's not enough 9 times out of 10. You've got to have enough ground bait mixed up in case you have situations like this where you get lots of boats. If you don't use it all, you could bag it up and take it home and put it in the freezer. I don't see anything wrong with that. So none of it goes to waste if you don't use it all. Just bag it up and stick it in the freezer. Thaw it out the night before and use it again the next time you go out.
Busy, busy. Yeah. It's like you have to start the match again.
So there's plenty of fish to be caught. To be fair, most of them are quite small, but at least you're still doing something. You're putting fish in the net. So I'm going back down the shelf now, back on the maggot, over the top of my squat line to see if there's any bonus fish sitting over the grain bait that I've just fed. Sometimes you'll feed the grain bait and half decent fish will home straight in on it. So it's worth having a look. There we go, that's what I'm on about. There's a better stamp fish. Taking my time, I don't want this to drop off. Lovely bonus skimmer. Look at that. Beautiful. Single red maggot on a size 18 natural N20.
Eh? No. Yeah, same here, Joe. Went in and had two skimmers and two drops on the bed early. That's what we want, is them buggers there. What I've just had.
That'll get me up the field a bit.
Hopefully, there was a few
See if there's any more about.
from that. It was a bit chaotic for a little bit. Not a chaotic for a bit, it was.
It's a busy canal this morning. A lot of boats about. I don't know how he got the maggot in his mouth. Topping up again. I tend to just put enough in the 5 litre tub. There's just 5 litre EVA tubs they are. They act as a cover as well, because like I don't put anything over the top of my bucket. Normally, I'll just drop a couple of those, at least one of them, into the top of the tub above the ground bait, and that'll keep it sheltered away from the sun and what have you. So it keeps it nice and moist. And also it helps me keep my mixes separate. I just put enough of the mix into the tub to make the balls that I need. And it stops it all from drying out then. You don't want it drying out ground bait. I need it moist to be able, first of all, to be able to form the balls and hopefully hold in the peg once they've entered the water. And feeding plenty of squats over the top. And you're getting the odd better fish. The stamp in general is quite small, but then, like I say, get the odd better fish. Still a few fish to be caught down the shelf at the minute, even with the boat traffic. Just a bit too big to swing, that one. Don't want to risk it, so just chuck the net under it. Still fishing the maggot, still getting the odd better fish mixed in amongst the small ones. While it's keeping going under and I'm still hitting bites, I'll carry on with the maggot. That's obvious to me. There's just tiny fish in a peg, and then I'll switch to the pinky, and then on down to the squat if I need to. Even after all those bouts, just topping up has maintained that down the shelf line, and I'm still catching the odd better fish down there. They're not massive, but they're good bonuses.
Hey? Hmm. Everyone I'm netting, kicking up and getting my glasses all filled, but I can't see a bloody thing. I've cleaned them twice.
Single red maggot hook bait. I'm making sure I'm feeding that squat so as it's feeding the two lines that I'm intending to fish. I always tend to feed my squat lines in one area. I don't do it in two parts of the peg, two different parts of the peg. I always do it up and down the same shelf, if you know what I mean, in the same area. So I don't want to be splitting fish about. Right, so I've missed a couple of bites on the maggot now, so I'm just going to drop down to the pinky and see if I can keep on catching. Looks like this is the reason why. Very small fish. Yeah, I'm not going to be doing that much. Try something else.
Bloody pond.
Going up the shelf now, see if there's any better fish up the shelf. Gain on a pinky. £13 is just shy at the back end of that boat. I can reach forward and get it flush to the back of the boat if I want to. But just laying it in normally, it ends up running about a foot off the boat. There's plenty of fish over there. Not a brilliant stamp, but there's the odd better one mixed in amongst them. Yeah, look, there's a nice one. Just maintaining, putting squats in. I'm putting plenty of squats in. Keep those fish active in the peg. And hopefully draw more in. And it's a bite of chuck. Fishing a single fluoro pinky on this. And that's a size 22 natural N10. Love these hooks.
Joe.
Drop it back down the shelf again. Just swapping between the two lines.
Okay.
Pick a few fish off each before I move. Although they tend to be, the down the shelf line now just tends to be full of little tiny fish. Seems the better fish want to be sitting up the shelf. So very small these are. I won't be doing this for too long.
Okay.
There's another boat coming through. Just prepare some more ground bait for when he's gone. Keeping those lines topped up after boats. I had somebody comment to me the other day that they've been watching my videos and they said to me, "You know, I've put some bait in, you do, Brownie." And I says, "Well, I feel you need to, especially when you've got lots of boats on. You've got to keep that peg topped up. You've got to keep it topped up after boats because I just don't believe there's any bait left. 9 times out of 10, I'm convinced the bait's gone out your peg. And I'm obviously wanting ground bait because I'm still catching. There's times when it's not right. You'll know when it's not right because you'll stop getting so many bites. But while you're still getting bites, keep putting it in. Don't be afraid to feed. And I'm chopping up some worms now because I don't feel that worm line with grain bait has really pulled too many fish in. So I'm just going to chop some worms up and put it in the same area and see what happens. See if I can catch some more fish by just putting neat worm in. Obviously with a few casters as well on top. Going back to the ground bait, and while you're putting ground bait in, you've still got the chance of catching a bonus fish as well. Of it drawing in a bonus fish into your peg. So you've got to keep topping up. My opinion, that is, obviously. I feel that's the right way to go. So you look, not long after I've topped up, I'm into a better fish again. I like to finely chop my worms as well. I'm adding a bit of water there, so because it's quite a hot day, I'm adding a bit of water out of my casters into my chopped worm mix so as it doesn't dry out. So I'm basically feeding a mush. It's just a bit of a mush. I don't clean my worms off or anything like that. I just take them straight out the dirt, into the pot, chop them up. And I think that bit of dirt that is, the residue off the dirt is left in with the worms. It gives it a bit of a cloud when you're putting a mix in. I've never been one for washing worms off. So I've dropped that worm in there. I'm going to back over to the boat, the 13 metre line, and see if I can catch a few more fish off there while I let that settle for 5 minutes, and then I'll go back on it and I'll give it a go. All the time I'm putting a few fish in the net, albeit they're quite small, some of them. Right, time to have a look on the worm. Small segmented Dandrobina worm's going to go on the hook now. I'll look it, then nipping it in half between my thumb and finger. And see if we can catch some perch or some skimmers over the top of it. Bear in mind that never really worked when I put it in with ground bait. Let's see if this makes any difference. Still maintaining feeding the squats though. There we go, fish straight away. Little perch. Don't mind catching these perch because they're real weight builders, these are. They're bigger than the roach I was catching mostly anyway. And get a run of perch coming into the net. I'm all for it. This one's slightly better. Again, I'm using my double six, my favourite double six elastic.
Aye.
And that's a 4x14 intercarbon. It's a bodied float with a 1.5mm tip, and I can hold back on that float against the flow if I need to. There's not no real flow on this canal today, it's just a gentle tow. There's no locks on this bit of water, so it goes for miles between locks. As you can see, there's a real slow tow on it. It doesn't usually pull very hard. Occasionally it can do, depending on how many boats are on there, I suppose. I'll be happy if I can catch a quick pound of fish on this line while I'm resting my other lines. At the moment, them worms are working a treat. Considering I put them in I did put worms in initially in my ground bait and I couldn't catch over them.
Tommy Rough.
This is a little Tommy Rough, this one. Little Daddy Rough. It's not usually the best sign. Way up. How many times have I mentioned about making sure your pole section's together before you ship out? You'd think I'd practice what I preach, wouldn't you? Poles come apart as I'm shipping back. And there's a fish on it. It's a good job you on a carp. That'd have been halfway down the canal by now. I've got it. Noddy. When that happens as well, be careful how you pick your pole up out the water, because normally they fill up with water and you pick it up. The added weight of the water can end up easily breaking a section. So just be careful when you pick it up, you make sure you empty that water out before you lift it. It'll usually come out the tip section. Half decent perch.
Check your sections. You give.
Using a size 16 natural N30 on that rig. Somebody had a look at my rigs the weekend, my worm rig, and they said, that's a big hook. That's a big 16, that is. It may be a big 16, but when it's buried inside a worm, I don't think it makes a blind bit of difference. Plus, anything I hook on that, as long as it's not too big and it's going to break the hook length or whatever, 9 times out of 10, once I hook them, they stay hooked. If a fish is big enough to get the worm in its mouth, you ain't got to worry about that hook. Also, I don't fish light hook clamps on my worm lines either. I fish out 16 hook clamps. I don't think it makes a blind bit of difference. The fish doesn't see that line, it doesn't see that hook. All it sees is that worm dancing in front of it, and it nails it. And then if it's a bigger fish, you get more of a chance of getting it out by using heavier lines and bigger hooks. Obviously, I got my 6 elastic as well, which will handle quite a lot of big fish, that will. Plus it's through a top 2 kit and obviously through a puller, so if you need it to, it will stretch quite a way. But when you strike, especially fishing for perch, when you strike, it's got that bit of harshness to set that hook in a bony mouth of a perch. Well, I've stopped getting bites on the worm so much now, so I'm going to run a maggot over the top of it and see if that helps. See if that gets another bite. Sometimes it'll get a few stragglers. There you go, it's caught fish. Single red maggot. Lovely. Back down the shelf on the right hand side now. And it's back to having a fisher chuck on that. While I'm letting that worm line settle again. You get another boat. Time to top up that worm line now. Just make sure those are nice and finely chopped up. A few casters in as well. And hopefully that'll catch me another quick pound of fish. Back up the shelf. Just keeping ticking over, putting fish in the net. Okay, most of them are small, but there's fish going in the spread bag. Now he's gone tight over because there's a boat coming from the other way as well. This boat annoys me. Okay, he's going through at a nice pace. Got no problem with him at all at the minute. But then all of a sudden, he throws the rudder over, which absolutely decimates the peg. There's absolutely no need for it.
Yes, you've just made of that.
And I told him what I felt.
Eh? Should just stayed as you
He should have just carried on straight away he was.
Ramming it over like that.
Slam the rudder over. They just don't realise what damage they cause. Sometimes I think they do it on purpose as well. 9 times out of 10 the boaters are nice. You know, they're considerate. But then you get the odd idiot like that one. They just don't care.
Should they do it on purpose, you know?
Wear me up, that did.
Absolute clown.
So again, I'm feeding again. Starting the peg all over again. That's what it seems like every time something like that happens. You've got to start your peg again.
Oh, dear. You what, mate? You see what he's just done then, Jack?
You can imagine I got through quite a bit of ground bait that day.
I mean, he had to go over, fair enough. But as soon as he got over it, he went like that with the rudder.
Well, you can see the amount of times I've refed the peg. I got through some ground bait. Never been one shy to put ground bait in. I've got to refeed the worm line again as well because he's just washed all that away. Wasting my worms. That could be anywhere now, they could. Can be quite annoying because you can spend all day building a peg and you get one bite to come through like that and it just decimates it. So you've got to start all over again. And hope that the fish will react to it again. Should be okay. Didn't even know how to bite then. Shipping it back to come off the line and realise I've got a little perch on. I do tend to fish the worm slightly over depth. And luckily there's still a few about on that line. Feeding the neat worm was definitely the better way to go than putting it in ground bait. Quick couple of fish on the worm, back over to 13 metre line. Back to catching little roach. And another boat. Say 99% of the boats are decent. They know what they're doing. You just get the odd idiot that tries to wreck your day. I don't mind any amount of boats as long as them considerate to you and them sensible when they drive down. Like I say, we need boats. The stamp's slightly improving now on the far line. Well, there's still plenty of fish about. I'm fishing 2s elastic on that line. Down the shelf I use 3s, and then up the shelf I use 2s. Them relentless. Them relentless. About a chuck. More ground bait required. It's a good job I mix plenty up. Bit more worm. It's like you're restarting your peg every time some boats have come over. Because I feel sometimes that's what you've got to do. You just got to keep restarting your peg. My eagle eyes there had spotted the babby had dropped his teddy. I'm really struggling to catch any decent fish on the down the shelf line now. I'm tiny now. So back on the worm.
Is that a no then, Ed?
We'll
You
see if I
ain't
can catch a
found
few
us?
more fish on the worm.
Is it found the what? Found the what?
And there's still the odd perch about to be caught, which is still slightly better stamped than the roach. With the odd bigger one mixed in, slightly bigger. None of them are massive fish, but all worth catching. This one's half decent. Warrants the use of the landing net. 5 or 6 ounce. Happy days.
Just the odd one, Joe.
Lovely jubbly. Mixing again. Another ball of ground bait. I haven't counted how many balls I put in on the day, but I put a lot in. As you can see, I've put a lot of ground bait in over this day, throughout this match. Although that down the shelf line is fading fast, I'm still putting ground bait in there and hoping that at some point they'll come on strong there. So even with all these bouts today, I've still maintained to keep my pegs going by keep topping up, keeping bait going in. I'm sure if I hadn't have topped up the way I have, the fish would have drifted away and I wouldn't have caught as many, anywhere near as many. That bottom of the shelf line to my right isn't very good now. It's tiny little fish on there, but there's still fish in the peg. So back up the shelf while I leave that settle. I know I'll catch here. There's been a steady stream of fish here all day. Albeit small. But at least I can go over there and know I'm going to catch. And there we go. That's the last fish of the day. One last fish on the worm. Nice chunky little perch. Happy days. Right, so I've had a nice steady match. I've managed to catch fish all day by maintaining 3 lines. I never had a bite on the hemp. I did try it a few times and it never worked, so I never spent any real time on it. It's one of those methods that if you're going to catch on it, you'll get an indication pretty quickly. And I never had any indications on it, so I got back onto lines where I knew I could catch fish.
I had £6.
And I've ended up with a nice net of fish.
No, I had £6. Nowhere near.
Now Wezza, who's doing the weighing in there, he won the match with £9 14 ounces. And there was an 8-3 from up the other end, Steve Dudley. And I ended up third with just over £8, £8 one and some drams. And cracking days fishing. There's John T. Got a bad back, that man, hasn't he? Still bent down to get that fish back in the basket, bless him. There's Dudder's just turned up because he's worried. He's the one that's had the £8 3. And he's worried that I'm going to beat him. But I ain't got £8 3. Cracking days fishing. There's my pairs partner, Scott Dudson, doing the recording. Lovely net of fish. So if you enjoyed that, give it a thumbs up. And you'd like to see more, please subscribe. And I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.